Today is Thursday, November 14th. We're breaking down a few of the key moments and arguments in the first public impeachment hearings, and why officials are double-checking one state's recent election. Plus, Google checking accounts, Nike leaves Amazon, and the Razr Reboot. Then hang out after the news for Think to Note Thursday's bonus interview. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in less than 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Day one of public hearings in the impeachment inquiry is now complete. The American public had the chance to hear directly from two of the witnesses who have decades of experience in foreign service and have both served under presidents from both parties. Bill Taylor, the top American diplomat in Ukraine, and George Kent, a senior State Department official. They faced hours of questioning from lawmakers yesterday, and on live TV, they shared their take about President Trump's efforts to get Ukraine to investigate his political rivals, including the Bidens, and the potential impact on both Ukraine and the United States. So here are a few of the key takeaways from the testimony. First of all, there was a surprise. Some new information from Ambassador Taylor. He brought up a phone call we had not heard about until yesterday, and Taylor himself said he only learned about it last week. Taylor's staff member overheard President Trump back in July asking about, quote, the investigations, end quote, while talking with another ambassador. Well, that ambassador later reportedly told the staffer that Trump cares more about investigating the Bidens than what actually happens in Ukraine. Taylor also said some things we've heard before, info that's at the core of Democrats' reason for this impeachment inquiry. Taylor said he came to understand the $400 million in security assistance that Congress designated to Ukraine was put on hold as a way to pressure Ukraine's president, Zelensky, to publicly announce investigations into the 2016 U.S. election and the Bidens. Taylor called it crazy and wrong to pressure a foreign power to interfere in U.S. elections, and that he was so alarmed by what he heard and saw, he considered quitting. He also outlined the importance of U.S. support in Ukraine as the country hopes to end an ongoing and violent war with Russia. But Republicans say Trump was simply focused on fighting all corruption in Ukraine, and they felt this week's testimony was hearsay, that neither Taylor nor Kent have ever talked directly to President Trump, so it was basically a bad game of telephone. Though it is important to note, the White House has stopped some of the people who do often talk with the president from testifying. Republicans also argue the military aid, that $400 million, was eventually released without a promise for investigations, so they say there was no bribe. Democrats say the money was only released after they got wind of the whistleblower's complaint. And so, while the American public could hear some testimony for themselves, it does not appear at this point that lawmakers in either party have really changed their minds. As for President Trump, he said in a press conference that he did not watch yesterday's hearing for 1 minute and called it a witch hunt. And no, these public hearings are not over yet. Another witness testifies tomorrow, and 8 more are scheduled for next week. But first, in today's Think to Note Thursday, right after the news in this episode, I'm talking with an attorney who took part in the Watergate case involving President Nixon. She'll share what's similar and different about impeachment hearings then and now. It's late in the game, but expect an official announcement today about another presidential candidate in the 2020 race. Remember, I mentioned this one earlier this week. Former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick was thinking about running. Well, now several media outlets are citing sources who say Patrick will officially enter the race today. But it could be an uphill battle for him. CNN says he's not super well known nationally and doesn't have a lot of personal wealth to finance a campaign. He also missed the deadlines to be on the ballot in both Alabama and Arkansas. But he believes he'll appeal to a lot of different voters in a race with no one clear frontrunner. Officials in Kentucky will be double-checking the vote totals in the recent race for governor. Remember, it was a close election. The Democrat appeared to win by about 5,000 votes, but the Republican candidate is refusing to admit defeat. Now the AP reports this recanvass, as it's called, is hoping to clear things up. It's not technically a recount, since it won't be recounting each individual vote. Instead, it's basically double-checking that each county got its numbers right on election night and that they match what was provided to the state. It's not expected to change the election outcome, but you never know. The recanvass starts this morning, and the results are expected as soon as this afternoon. As expected, a bunch of cold weather records were broken across the U.S. this week. The National Weather Service says we haven't seen intense cold like this in early November in more than a century. And sadly, at least 8 people have died because of it. Parts of the Midwest saw single-digit temperatures, while southern states like Alabama had temps in the teens. But the weather should be back to normal for this time of year by this weekend. All right, we have much more news ahead, but let's take a quick break to thank today's sponsor, Zola. Zola is a wedding company reinventing the wedding planning and registry experience for the better. From engagement to wedding to decorating your first home, Zola is there for you. Zola allows you to conveniently manage everything online and in one place, so it saves so much time for couples. And trust me, when you're planning a wedding, any time saved is appreciated. And here's the thing, you can start with a free wedding website that is so easy and takes just minutes to set up and customize. And Zola is the only place where you can register for honeymoon funds and gift cards, along with all the other physical gifts you typically see. I love that part about it. And you can even get beautiful wedding invites that match your wedding website. Just order a free sample pack or printed proof to make sure you love it before you buy. So go ahead, build your free wedding website on Zola and get $50 toward your registry. Go to zola.com/newsworthy to get started today. Again, build your free wedding website on Zola and get $50 toward your registry. Go to Zola, Z-O-L-A, zola.com/newsworthy to get started. Now, back to the news. Google is the latest big tech company hoping to play a bigger role in your financial life. Reuters reports Google plans to start offering personal checking accounts through its Google Pay app. It'll work through a partnership with Citigroup and a small credit union at Stanford University. CNBC says the company hopes to eventually work with a variety of banks and credit unions in the U.S. to offer so-called smart checking accounts that would come with insights and budgeting tools. The accounts will reportedly be ready next year. It's Google working to take on yet another industry, from search to healthcare to financial services. So this will likely face some pushback. Lawmakers are already concerned these big tech companies are too big and powerful. Google, of course, is not alone in moves like this. Facebook just launched Facebook Pay, Apple launched its own credit card, and Amazon is also reportedly thinking about offering checking accounts. Nike is breaking up with Amazon. The company says it will not be selling its sneakers or clothing on Amazon anymore, so it can focus on selling to customers directly. The split between Amazon and Nike ends a pilot program that started back in 2017. It was meant to prevent the sale of fake Nike items online. Well, sources told the Wall Street Journal the deal didn't really work and third parties still sold counterfeit shoes and clothes. It's not great for Amazon, and the question is, will other brands follow in Nike's footsteps? It's official, the Motorola Razr phone is making a comeback. It was a popular, even iconic flip phone years ago, and now the Razr has been rebooted for 2019. It's now an Android smartphone that can fold in half. So while it looks similar, it's not really a flip phone. It's a full touchscreen that folds, so a foldable phone. But The Verge points out it's a bit different than some other foldable phones we've seen. Many are like smaller tablets that fold into smartphone size. Well, this one is a normal smartphone that then folds even smaller for your pocket. The Razr will cost you about $1,500 when it arrives in January. Netflix and Nickelodeon are joining forces. The two will reportedly make original animated content based on old and new Nickelodeon characters. There aren't a lot of details about the deal yet, but the New York Times reports the duo is going to make a SpongeBob SquarePants spinoff. This is a big move for Netflix and will likely help it deal with the new competition from Disney+. Disney+, by the way, now has more than 10 million subscribers. Variety says that happened faster than most experts expected. It's good news for Disney's new streaming service, even though the service did run into some technical problems on launch day. Time magazine came out with its first ever Time 100 Next list. It's basically a list of people who represent the rising stars or the future of various industries, whether that be in entertainment, politics, business, or human rights. Singer Camila Cabello, YouTube star turned late-night talk show host Lily Singh, and politician Pete Buttigieg are just a few names that made the list. And you can find the full list in today's show notes. But all eyes were on the biggest names in country music last night at the 53rd Annual CMA Awards. Carrie Underwood hosted once again, alongside Dolly Parton and Reba McEntire. ABC News reports some of the big winners were Casey Musgraves for Music Video of the Year, Blake Shelton for Single of the Year, and Garth Brooks won Entertainer of the Year for the 7th time. And that's it for the main news today, but now it's time for Thing to Know Thursday, where a different expert explains a different thing to know only on Thursdays after the news. And this week, we're talking about the impeachment process and how what we're seeing this week with the public hearings compares to what happened in the 70s with the Watergate scandal and President Nixon. Nixon resigned before he would be impeached. My guest today is Jill Wine-Banks, who was actually one of the 3 assistant Watergate special prosecutors. She's now an MSNBC legal analyst and appears on various national media. Her book, The Watergate Girl, comes out in February. So here's my conversation with Jill Wine-Banks. Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for coming on The Newsworthy.
Thank you for having me on.
So we know you were directly involved in the Watergate case involving President Nixon. How does this process that we're seeing so far today compare to that one in terms of speed or how partisan the vibe is or anything else that you've noticed?
Well, there are as many differences as there are similarities. The differences are, I would start with the media environment. During Watergate, we had 3 news outlets, NBC, ABC, and CBS, and they all had the same facts. They might have people who had different opinions about what the facts meant, but they didn't debate whether the facts were the same. Today, where you have so many social media outlets and so many different networks, you often have people who believe that they are hearing the facts, whereas if you listen to another channel, you would not recognize that information as fact. And that's, I think, a serious problem, is that the facts are available. Most networks covered it gavel to gavel. And so you could watch every single minute and not be diverted by any commentary, just by the questions that were asked and the answers that were given.
The public's opinion has a big role in this, even though it's the lawmakers actually voting. They're listening to what the public's opinion is that will determine their own actions, right? I mean, that's why that's so important.
Absolutely. It is extremely important because unlike in a criminal case where lawyers present evidence to a grand jury and the grand jury makes a decision, in a way the House is the grand jury in this case. They do the investigation and they make a decision as to whether to proceed to trial. But the trial is a totally political event. It doesn't have the same legal standards in the sense of what are the exact elements of the specific violation of law. It's up to whatever Congress thinks. And Congress will definitely be guided by how people react. Certainly during Watergate, that was also true. And during the Clinton impeachment, that was equally true, where the Congress members are guided by their constituents. And if their constituents do not want him impeached, then they won't vote for impeachment.
There was a similar process, it's my understanding, in the Watergate case where witnesses testified in private first and then in public, right? And can you explain why is it done that way?
In the criminal system, which people are much more familiar with, you have a grand jury that meets in secret, that is a tool of the prosecution where they can bring in witnesses to testify in secret. Now, one of the reasons it's in secret is because you don't want to damage the reputation of the person you're investigating if it turns out that the accusations are, not supported. The other reason you keep it secret is that witnesses can be swayed by hearing someone else's testimony. And what you want is everybody's best memory. So you don't want witness 1 to hear what witness 2 says because it might change their testimony. You want their memory. And you don't want them coordinating. And so that's another really important reason to keep grand jury testimony secret. When it comes to trial, everybody's testimony is given to the defendant so that the defendant can defend him or herself and can answer the accusations against him.
In today's process, do you think there should be a special prosecutor or third party who is running the show because we do have such a partisan environment?
I don't know whether a special prosecutor would help, but I think that today's hearing showed that the new rules that they established are working. I think the members of Congress acted mostly respectfully toward one another, not completely, but mostly. And the witnesses were very calm and they refused to get sucked into a political dialogue.
Let's talk a little bit about next steps. If the House does decide to impeach the president, and it is up to the House, who has the majority of Democrats, so it's very possible, can you explain what happens next with the Senate?
Right now, we're in the grand jury investigative phase. They determine that there's enough facts to hold the president accountable in a trial. Then the Senate becomes the jury. Unlike most juries where you would remove people for bias, you know that this is a biased jury.
One of the questions from a listener was, will this process actually lead to something, or is it just for show? And I think you've talked a little bit about that, but can you respond?
Yes, I don't think it's for show. I think that it should inform voters. I think that if people pay attention, number one, it will influence their representatives, their senators. But even if it doesn't, it can influence how people decide to vote.
There's another witness scheduled to testify publicly on Friday, then 8 more witnesses scheduled for next week. Is there a concern this will be information overload for Americans?
You know, I would say in this day and age where the attention span is about, I don't know how many seconds, it might be. But I hope it isn't. Watergate riveted the nation. People stayed home from work. People who had to go to work would take off at lunch, and you have to remember this is 45, 50 years ago. People didn't have a telephone they could watch the hearings on. They would go to department stores and stand in the television department over lunch hour to watch the hearings. And then they would go home and they would watch the recap on PBS. And that went on for months, not just for days. It so affects our democracy. And in order to build a good case, you have to take each piece and fit it together. So today's testimony laid out a sort of a big picture case. Now you have to get down to much more finite details. And that's, I assume, what's going to happen.
And you can read more in today's show notes. Just go to thenewsworthy.com, click episodes, and find today's date. Thank you so much for listening today. The Newsworthy is here for you by 4 in the morning every weekday. We'll chat again tomorrow. Have a great day.